All right. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sandy Kaiser. I am one of the Employment First Specialists for the Division of Developmental Disabilities. And today you're joining us for the Champions of Employment. What is Employment First? So I'm excited about today's presentation. So before we get started, we just like to do a real quick little pulse and see who's in the audience. So you'll have about 1 minute. Let us know. Are you a support coordinator? Are you a service provider? Are you a regional office employee? Possibly a UR chair, maybe you're a TCM TAC, regional office director, something like that. Maybe you work for a different state office, vocational rehabilitation. Maybe you work for rehab services for the blind, or maybe our behavioral health side here at DMH. So maybe you're an individual or a family member or some other role. So please, when that poll comes up here we go. You've got 1 minute. Let us know what your role is. All right, so our time's up, and then Kat will let us know the results here in a second. And it looks like we have a good many that are support coordinators. We have some service providers joining us. There are a few regional office employees, and it looks like we might have 1 or 2 individual family members, other state employees, and some others. So welcome. Glad you could join us, and we hope you get something out of today's topic. So today's topic is all going to be about employment first, really understanding what employment first means, and seeing it through the lens of some different perspectives. So I've invited 4 wonderful ladies to join me. So Kim Buckman, who is a director of support coordination for County Connections. Candace Cunningham, who is a self-advocate and also works for UMKC's Institute for Human Development. Ellen Fern is a parent. And Cassidy Job also is a parent, but has 2 other roles too. She is the president of our MOAPC chapter. And if you don't know what APSI stands for, it stands for Association of People Supporting Employment First. And she is also the executive director of Summit Future Foundation, one of our service providers. So ladies, I'm going to stop for a minute and let each of you kind of introduce yourselves, provide any additional background information if you think that others might want to know about you. So we'll start with Kim, and we'll just kind of go down the list.
Hi, I'm Kim Buckman, as Sandy said, with County Connections. We are a support coordination agency up in the northeast corner of Missouri, supporting 8 counties. Employment is an initiative for our organization and has been for several years. My background prior to support coordination was working in supported employment. So something that I'm still very passionate about and excited for opportunities like this. So thanks for letting me be on here, Sandy.
Candace, you're next on the list.
Hi everyone, my name is Candace Cunningham. Like Sandy said, I am a self-advocate and work at UMKC Institute for Human Development. I am also on the board of MOAPC and also on the board of Summit Future Foundation with Cassidy Job, and I'm just awesome.
And Candace, correct me if I'm wrong, but you are also on People First, correct?
I am not on it. I just work with them.
Okay, you just help facilitate. Okay, yes. All right. Yes. Okay, so I take that back. Thank you for that correction. Ellen.
I have, my name's Ellen, and I'm the, excuse me, the mom. My daughter is pervasive development disorder, more on the serious side. She's 23 years old, so I'm going through the process of a community waiver so that I can get her some supported employment unless she could be independent.
Awesome. And Cassidy.
Afternoon, everyone. My name is Cassie Job. As Sandy shared, I wear a lot of different hats. I've been actively involved in the disability advocacy community for about 15 years now. I have 2 teenage boys who are on the autism spectrum, and that of a mother is the most important role that I play. I am also the founder of, or one of the founders of Summit Future Foundation, and I have had the opportunity to serve on the APSI board for several years now. I actually learned about employment first when I was participating in an advocacy training called Partners in Policymaking, and it very quickly became something that was near and dear to my heart because as a parent, I was exploring what life looks like for adults who have developmental differences, and the opportunities that I saw weren't super exciting, and the idea of employment first really just rang true to me. Something else is I would like to agree with Candace that she is awesome. Candace is a very strong advocate and somebody who I have the opportunity to work with in a lot of different capacities, and she's taught me a lot about employment first and just a lot of different advocacy movements happening across the state.
All right, thank you. And just real quick, I am seeing a comment in the chat that some of us are extremely hard to hear. So just a reminder, make sure we are really projecting our voices and trying to make it so that everybody is able to get something out of this. So we have another quick little pulse check here. So just kind of trying to gauge where everybody is in their own personal beliefs. So we want you to rate how much you agree with the following statement, that all individuals, regardless of disability, are capable of working. So, first choice is 100%. There's not one person who cannot work or one type of disability that would make work impossible for anybody. Number 2 might be, yeah, I believe it mostly, but there are a few people I've encountered whose disabilities make employment pretty difficult, Then that third choice might be, okay, yeah, I believe employment is possible for a lot of individuals, but I know there are a few disabilities out there that employment's just impossible for. And then that fourth option is, I really want to, but my own personal experience, I've seen quite a few on my caseload who have been deemed incapable of working. So you've got 1 minute to let us know where you are. And if those answers don't kind of describe where you are personally, pick the one that comes the closest. So and you may have to scroll a little bit if it's not showing up all the options on your screen. So just an FYI there, you might have to do some scrolling. Okay, and we'll get the results here in a second. All right, so it seems like just a little bit less than half kind of picked that second answer, saying mostly, but there are few individuals whose disabilities have made employment extremely difficult. There's the second most picked choice was for a lot of individuals, employment is possible, but there are some disabilities that make employment impossible. And then we had a few people kind of said, hey, 100% all in, not one person on my caseload who can't work or one type of disability that cannot work. You know, it's all there. So exciting to see that mix. So hopefully everybody will come away with something fresh, something new to take away today. So we're going to get in here and we're going to start with our question for our panelists. So what does employment first mean to you? And I'm going to start with the last person that was on that list. So Cassidy, go ahead. You can start us off. What does employment first mean to you?
I already shared a little bit about what employment first means to me personally. But professionally, employment first means people with developmental disabilities have the opportunity to explore employment opportunities in a variety of settings and receive the supports that they need for comprehensive work-based learning experiences first before they begin to explore employment in more restrictive or segregated settings.
Right. Kim, I'm going to jump to you. What does employment first mean to you?
So I grew up that employment was always an expectation. And so to me, employment is an expectation and that all people have the right to work. And as support coordinators and coming from our role, I really feel like it's our responsibility to help facilitate and promote that as an expectation and as a means of meeting individuals' needs, giving them that as a choice versus maybe more restrictive or other types of supports to meet that need. So I feel like that should be always part of the conversation and that we have that responsibility to start that conversation.
All right, now I'm going to switch to Candace. What does employment first mean to you?
Employment first means to me is knowing that people with disabilities has a choice of finding a job within their community if they choose to, making the same amount and being treated like anyone else in the workplace.
Right, and Ellen, wrapping us up, what does employment first mean to you?
Well, my daughter's 23 and she's very smart, not super sociable unless you can give her something. But I think that she is wasting her time at home. She's like in early retirement. She does music, she does art, she runs around. But since she did SWEP in high school and she had supervised work like at Goodwill, she did very well for 4 hours a day. And I think she had a good time. That's what I want for her, is to have the dignity and the pride that goes along with working like dad and mom and siblings. So that's why it's important to me.
And everyone participating, you'll notice I've got some talking points here on the slide. And most of these presenters I talked to prior to us getting this event put together. And just kind of touching base with them, asking them the same questions that I'm asking them today. And I captured some of the talking points that I heard from them, as well as some others, our Employment First Missouri team, for example. And, you know, some of the common things I heard from speaker to speaker, you know, employment is, in a competitive integrated setting, is really an intrinsic right. And even in some respects, a responsibility. When you think about it, we all grew up with the expectation, hey, you got to support yourself somehow. You're going to go into work. So that, you know, as support coordinators, really, we should be saying employment is an expectation and responsibility. But one of the things that really kind of resonated with me is that employment first is about equity. It's about treating people with disabilities the same as all of us. You know, Again, as I mentioned, most of us grew up with the expectation that we were going to have to enter the workforce, that we were going to have to support ourselves somehow. And are we sending the same message to people with disability? Are we giving them the same opportunities to have the same experiences, same options, same choices as we've had? And then it's also encouraging it, knowing that we have this employment first policy and that we have employment services that the division can offer. It's basically saying there is support available to those who need it. And it's a matter of just coordinating that support. So I did mention this was going to be interactive. So now to all of you participating, we want to hear from you. What does employment first mean to you? So unfortunately, you guys are all muted. You're not going to be able to come off mute. So you're going to have to put it in the chat box. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with how I like to run this, I don't move on until I get at least 1 or 2 comments in the chat box. So and I do see a comment already. Somebody said they have a son living at home who has some mental challenges. He tried working in a community workshop, but could not handle it, and now attends a day hab. And I remember talking to somebody prior to this event and was kind of asked, okay, so my child gets help getting a job and it doesn't work out for whatever reason. Then what? And my response to this person was, well, what happens with the rest of us? We go on to the next job. We look at it, we assess, okay, what went wrong? Was it not a good match for us? So was it, we tried to put ourselves in a job that we really didn't like? Did we find out something like, ooh, I really need to go get these kind of supports? Or, the way the support was offered didn't really provide me with what I need. So you assess what went wrong, and then you go on to the next learning experience. And I'm seeing some more. Okay, competitive and inclusive employment. Oh, wait a minute. Okay. Competitive and inclusive employment that is in connection with person's interests, abilities, and skills was one response. Employment first is like people first. Individuals should explore employment as a means of earning a living. There are so many different jobs that can be modified for anyone's needs. Lovely. Lexi, you're going to be my next speaker in one of these. From another person, employment first means each individual attaining the confidence and happiness that comes with employment suited to their strengths and likes. Yeah, getting to explore, having those experiences. And then, of course, from people supporting other individuals, it's supporting individuals to help them find a job that they can do to the best of their ability. Oh my gosh, love it. Employment first means getting those getting the dignity of risk. Oh, yes, dignity of risk, being self-determined and living integrated within the community. And it will help individuals learn new skills to be able to live a positive life. Oh, I love this. All right, we got to move on here. So next question for the panelists. What piece of employment first is do you feel is the most important? So this time I am going to start with Candace.
Hello. So sorry, I'm here. Sorry. The piece that I think is the most important to employment first is employment. I think I told you, I know, letting people having the choice of where they want to work and that dignity of it. If it doesn't work out, then let's find another job until we know what employment is good, will work for them.
All right, thank you. Cassidy, I'm gonna let you go next.
I think that there are a lot of components of employment first that are incredibly important. If I had to choose one, I would say that it is the idea of changing the conversation around employment for people that do have disabilities. in that it shouldn't be a question. It should be an expectation. They should have the right to exhaust all opportunities to be able to obtain and maintain employment. And I really loved what you said, Sandy, about taking failures more as an evaluative opportunity rather than having, people are going to fail. That's going to happen. There's not a single person on this call that has been successful in everything that they've done. But part of what is so important about employment first is making sure that we're not, taking one instance and using that as a reason for why a person can never be integrated in employment. So really, all of the things on this list, but I do think just changing the overall conversation about employment is the most important aspect of employment first.
Ellen, what do you think is the most important piece to employment first?
Well, because I'm trying to get that right now, it's going to be follow through from, especially on my part, but for whatever provider is there with the services, and from Employment First, which I've had a really good relationship with Sandy. So to me, that's a lot, actually, follow through. And that's, I think, one of the hardest things to do, because everybody has a lot on their plate, and to follow through on one thing, I think that's difficult, but I think that's the most important thing.
Thanks, Ellen. And just to, make a point, because I know as support coordinators, we have a lot on our plate and we may not have all the answers. But, as Ellen mentioned, it's sometimes not expecting us to have the answers, but following through. So if we don't know something, saying, hey, let me get back to you on that. And then, of course, getting back to that parent or that individual with that support or whatever they need. And if the support coordinator can't answer it, maybe it's connecting that individual, that family with somebody who can answer that and kind of like passing that baton over. Kim, what would you feel is the most important piece to employment first?
Well, I really agreed a lot with what Cassidy was saying. I felt like she was in my head. Have the same philosophy on employment first, but obviously an individual's choice in what they do, and that self-determination piece is vital, and I think is the most important. But as the lens of a support coordinator, I think for us is making sure that that individual has choices. When they can't make a choice if they don't have options. And so I think having that conversation and making sure that we start that conversation early and that we have that conversation often is really critical. I think that we have to help individuals have that dignity of risk that you've been talking about, to try what they want to choose, making sure that we are helping to address any of the barriers that are standing in the way. And so I think for us as support coordinators, it's starting the conversation and maybe changing our approach to the conversation, and how we handle that with individuals and families that we work with.
Yeah, and then again, as talking with a lot of you prior to this, things were just jumping out at me as I was hearing you all talk, that dignity of risk, that inclusion for all, making sure we're addressing the barriers, not just documenting those barriers, but really trying to chip away at them and going, okay, let's try this option. Oh, that didn't work. Let's try this. Oh, that didn't work. Let's try something else. And just keep working at addressing those barriers. As Ellen mentioned, making sure we're following through. We may not have all the answers, but at least we're doing what we can to connect individuals and families to somebody who could answer that question, or at least go find the answer for them. We're making sure that we're offering choices and options. You guys have mentioned changing those conversations, and it starts with raising those expectations. It's that belief, and Social Security does a wonderful job of this to everybody's frustration. Social Security will basically assume that everybody, regardless of whatever label they have, everybody can work and earn so much money unless you can prove otherwise. And it's that kind of mindset. Are we meeting people and having that expectation from the get-go that everybody can work unless you can prove otherwise. And guess what? Until we've tried everything under the sun, we probably haven't proved otherwise. And I will always tell people we are limited by our own experiences. So there's always technology, there's always some other experiences we haven't had. So, again, it's really trying to fully explore things. And then it's that informed choice. And a lot of times we think of informed choices, having all the information we need to make the decision that's best for us. But informed choice is not just being told all the information or given all that information, but it's really being able to understand that information. And one of our Employment First Missouri team, I remember him talking a while back that, if somebody said, hey, you want to go to this restaurant, but you've never tried that type of food. So say it's an Indian type of restaurant and you've never had Indian food. And so somebody's trying to explain to you what's on the menu at that Indian restaurant and what that can be. That's probably not going to be enough to really give you an informed choice as to whether or not you like that or don't. So again, being mindful of that informed choice is more than just being verbally given information or being given information in written form. But it's really also being able to experience and kind of understand things. So now we put it back on you guys. So just like we did, what do you feel as attendees? What do you feel is the most important piece to Employment First? All right, so I'm seeing some options come in. So choice, changing the conversation, employment choices, addressing the barriers, inclusion for all, informed decision, listening to the person and what they want. So awesome, great. Oh, somebody put in discovering, seeing what's out there in the community and finding intersection on skills and interest. And open-mindedness, I love that too. So I often think, because I have a lot of experience working with that transition age, and if you're talking to a kid coming out of high school and you're like, hey, do you want to work? But that student has only had work experience in things that they don't like doing, like cleaning bathrooms or running papers down the hallway. And they're just kind of like, yeah, I didn't like what I did. And you're like, hey, do you want to work? You're going to hear a big fat no, because their construct of what work means was the things they don't like doing. So I love that you kind of mentioned really seeing what's out there in the community and finding that intersection of skills and interest. Love that. All right. So last question here. And what we see from our National Core Indicator Survey, so we do this survey every year to adults, and it's individuals that are currently receiving waiver funding. So of those currently receiving waiver funding and not currently employed in a competitive integrated type setting, what we've consistently heard from those individuals year after year, about 40% of Missourians want that type of outcome. So that's what we're hearing from the people that we serve. 40% of them want to be employed in competitive integrated settings. But we know from our own Empowering Through Employment data, which is the services that we're funding. So it's not talking about connecting them with VR. It's talking about what DMH is funding. We only know about 8 to 9% of individuals with waiver funding are using that funding for employment support. So we've got this big discrepancy. So Cassidy, I'm going to start with you. What are your thoughts? How can we begin to close that gap?
It's going to take engagement from a wide range of stakeholders. I mean, the person is going to have an interest in employment. The family is going to have a belief that employment is possible. They're going to have access to resources that help them fully explore what employment opportunities are available to them. And they're going to have the ability to have those ongoing supports. It is really a whole community that's going to have to come together to really move that needle, which was AFSCME's theme next year. So I don't say that to be cliche, but it is about everybody coming to the table with a full dedication that every person with a disability has, the right to be able to work, and that we need to make sure that the resources are there to make it happen.
Ellen, as a parent, what do you think we need to be doing to close that gap?
Well, when it comes to supported employment, Maddie is very capable, but she could also walk away and look at something more interesting. So I think that having someone nearby, or looking at a group of kids, adults, that she would be highly successful. And so that's why that support is so important. I think she would enjoy her job. I think she would be great in a stockroom, unboxing at like Christmas and distributing it on the floor of the store for whatever business it is. So if she could have those choices, like everyone has mentioned, and if one doesn't work out, be able to switch to something else that's closer, I think she would be highly successful. And I guess that would happen during career planning.
So basically, it could happen a lot of ways. Yeah, career planning, we would be expecting that we're exploring, we're discovering what her interests are and what her skills are, and what opportunities align with both of those. But, as we just kind of mentioned, sometimes we think we have all the information, we go, and we find out for whatever reason, oh, that didn't work out. Maybe we had a piece of information missing. And I'm also hearing that the ability to move on to the next option, to kind of take what we can learn from that experience and do it again. Let's go on to the next learning experience. I mean, so many of us, if we were probably sitting here kind of talking about how many different jobs we've had, we'd hear, quite a bit of different stories. Started out here, then I went here, then here, oh, then back over here, then over here. So again, I think it's allowing individuals to have the same experiences as we all do. It's about that equity, really treating us all the same. But then I'm also hearing, providing the supports that are needed, whatever those supports might be. If that's a job coach, if that's some other support, whatever support is needed, it's figuring out, what do you need to be able to do what you want to do. Do I have that right?
Yes, exactly right. The fear of failure on my part, and having difficulty after that, like a bad mark, and her having difficulty with other employment just because of that scares me. So it's nice to know that you have that perspective that, yes, we'll find something else.
Kim, how do we close that gap?
Well, I agree with these ladies, and I think that we have to have everybody on board. And I think that takes a little bit of rebranding with how we offer and how we share our supports. I think that starts when people come to us through the front door, and we need to change the conversation. Often individuals are coming to us when they're in a point of crisis, and of course we have to support that crisis. But I think we have to paint the picture at the very beginning of the conversation that ultimately what we're working towards is for that individual to be as independent as possible, and for them to live their good life, and that employment is part of that expectation. And so I think that has to be set from the very get-go. And I think that we have to change in the conversation about how we offer employment supports, that it's not just about employment, but that those supports are a way of meeting a lot of other needs that individuals have, whether that's socialization or financial stability or safety, that employment is a means to meet that, like many other services, and that we should explore that first. And so I think that we just don't do a very good job of that during our planning process, on how we portray that service and that support. And I think that that planning has to be constant, and continuous, because it's not going to always work out, like Ellen's talking about. And there has to be that safety net of, that people can fail and that's okay. And so I think we have to continually have that approach and that conversation on how we present employment supports.
All right. And Candace, what do you think we need to do to close that gap?
I think we should understand why the person doesn't want to work. Understand, keep, on your third bullet, it says keep asking why, or go beyond what, to really understand why they don't want to work. Is it because they did it in high school and they had a bad experience? Or is it because they don't want to do this job because they don't like it? So they think that they have to always stick to this one job. Well, that's not true. You can have 10 jobs, until you find. So you have to keep an open ear and don't assume you know the answer with the why or the why. Just be open with the individual.
Yeah, and again, you guys kind of hit a lot on the talking points that I captured from my conversations with you behind the scenes. Actively listening to the people, don't assume anything. Candace, you were just talking about keep asking why. Go beyond the obvious to really understand why you're getting the answer you're getting. But one of the things in talking with you, Candace, was kind of like empowering people to have their own voice, especially if they're a young adult. So we know that for many individuals, and this isn't just for those with disabilities. Think about people without disabilities. Until you're 18, your parents are still your guardians. Your parents are still making a lot of decisions for you. You may not have had a lot of experience making some major life decisions, like figuring out how to spend money, or budgeting your money, or even deciding where do you want to live, where do you want to go to school, those kind of decisions. So young adults, even without disabilities, don't have a lot of experience making some, doing some things. So again, are we giving individuals with disabilities those same kind of opportunities to grow, to learn, and giving them the opportunities to then develop their own voice? And sometimes that might include some teaching in there with that. So some individuals might instinctively pick it up, but others, just like anything, some of us might need some teaching. If you were to try and teach me how to do stick shift, I would need a lot of teaching. Not going to be instinctive for me. All right. And as Kim, as you said, kind of moving beyond that crisis intervention as support coordination, a lot of times that's what we focus on. What's the crisis at the moment? Let's address that. And yes, that is going to take a priority. But if we're going to see us close that gap, we need to get beyond just that crisis intervention. And we need to start focusing on, okay, what are we going to do once that crisis is over? Once we got things kind of settled down, what's the next step? And also helping individuals and families to understand their choices, which also includes choice of service providers. So Ellen, you and I had a discussion, it's like, okay, here's this list of service providers. You didn't know anything about them. And you and I talked about questions that you could ask them to really figure out who you want to use. And of course, Kim, you kind of talked about proactively planning for that employment from day one, from the moment you start interacting with that family. And I even think of young kids. So we think about our own experiences and what things we had happen, you know, participating in Girl Scouts or Boy Scouts, having chores at home, being able to participate in sports leagues or after school clubs. All of those gave us some skills, maybe some interpersonal skills, maybe some decision making, some experience with independence and responsibility. And that helped set us up for future employment. So again, kind of think it's never too young to start planning for that employment. We're not going to be talking about employment services for a 3-year-old, but we can be talking about, hey, what experiences do 3-year-olds typically have that help put that person on that roadway for successful outcomes later on in life. So, and Kim, of course, you mentioned that employment as a way to meet other needs and integrate it in with everything. It's not siloed out and separate. And of course, we've also talked about changing the conversation. And we've also talked about that taking active steps. Don't just document those barriers and fears. Let's address them. Let's work at them. So, now from you guys, what do you as the attendees think? What do we need to do to close that gap between our NCI data and our empowering through employment data? So I've got one response, communication. Assume capability. Oh, yes. We say don't assume anything, but assume capability. I love that. So, working towards getting rid of fears about employment and Social Security benefits. Yes. So a plug, we now have a service called benefits planning. So there's no reason that we can't address that fear. So if somebody is saying, hey, I'm scared of working because I don't want to lose my benefits, are we then saying, hey, do we need to connect you with a benefits specialist? Do we need to possibly request benefits planning to help you get the information you need to know what your options are and really make that informed decision about employment? So I love it. Thank you so much. Plug out for our benefits planning service. So additional reflection for the panel, or I'm going to start with the attendees. So what is something you have heard today that you will implement or do differently? Okay, so I'm seeing a response already. Ask why more. And often I love it. So yes, you know, I've often heard you got to ask why 5 times. If you really want to get to the root or the real reason, you've got to ask why 5 different times. So you ask why, you know, why is that? Why is that? Why is that? And then finally, you start to really get to what the barrier or what the fear is. Try exploring all options, keeping an open mind. I love it. Keep an open mind. Of course, looking into benefits planning. Yes. So good thing. Ask questions. Awesome. So we've got one last poll question for our attendees. So where do you need more support in implementing it first? employment first, excuse me. Where do you need more support in implementing employment first? And you can select all that apply. Do you struggle with helping individuals and families see the possibilities and to believe employment is possible? Is it that you talk about it often, you provide many different options, but you need more support in really being able to afford individuals that truly informed decision process? So, maybe you need support with understanding the different services and supports available. So again, like Ellen said, it's being able to help individuals and families understand how's this going to work. Maybe you need more support in being able to address those barriers that may or may not, oops, see a typo, may or may not be resolved with a funded support. Maybe we're talking about transportation, or maybe we're talking about managing one's benefits. So not just knowing how work is going to affect one's benefits, but kind of helping them to kind of keep to the game plan or manage that. So poll's already started. We've got about 40 seconds left. Choose as many that you feel you need. Okay, and now we'll get our results. Okay, so it looks like a lot of people indicated that they're needing supports with addressing those barriers that may or may not be resolved with funded support. So kind of like that problem solving. What happens when this goes awry? There are a few that said support, understand the different services and supports available, and even a few that say helping individuals and families see the possibilities, to believe it is possible. So yeah, just like us, our own experiences can kind of hamper what we think is a possibility. And I think I saw something in the chat that there was a technical glitch that only allowed you to choose one option in the survey. Okay, well, good to know. So before we leave today, though, where you guys can learn some more. So, of course, on our website, here's the link to where you can find our employment first policy, to be able to read about it, and what does it mean? What does the division believe when we say employment first? Of course, APSE is a great resource about understanding what employment first. So the APSE Mo website has some videos, has some things to kind of help you understand employment first. And then there's also the National APSE's website, which provides a lot of good information. Also, our Employment First Missouri team. So we have Nick Holtz, who serves the western side of the state. He works with service providers, support coordinators, and regional offices in Albany, Kansas City, Joplin, and Springfield. Jessie Kenoy, she is our Central Missouri person. So she's going to work with those service providers, TCM providers, and regional offices that are Kirksville, Hannibal, Central Missouri, and Rolla. And then, of course, Leslie Quarles is on the eastern side. So she's going to do those service providers, TCM providers, and regional offices that are under St. Louis Regional Office, Sykeston, and Poplar Bluff. So before I move on, though, one last moment for our panelists to kind of provide any last advice or any thoughts that you want our attendees to hear before they leave today. So I'm going to start with you, Kim. what thoughts, if any, do you have for our guest?
Well, it kind of goes back to that last question you asked folks, and I was sitting there thinking about that and what Candace brought up about finding out why and what those barriers are, and really truly addressing and supporting those, and meeting the individual where they're at. And so I think that we have to, on the support coordination side, at least in our organization, really have to be better about digging in, and not just taking a question or an answer and then moving on. And so I just encourage people to just continue the conversation, change your approach, read the audience, and really figure out what's going to work for that individual, and what's important to that individual. So.
All right, moving on to Candace.
I agree with Kim, and not being afraid or not being afraid to try something new for somebody else. People can get a job as whatever they want to, but don't be afraid to actively work with them and not for them to get that job. Hope that makes sense.
Ellen.
Well, the part I liked a lot was when you said, ask why 5 times. Because sometimes I'll have these conversations and it'll be like, oh, but that didn't really answer my question. I'm still stuck. Now I have to start over again. But knowing that you are there with Employment First, that is critical to my family right now.
Glad to hear it. So next month is National Disability Employment Awareness Month. So I hope to have a great little personal story. Not my personal story, but some personal stories for you to share as part of our National Disability Employment Awareness Month. I've reached out to a couple so far, and they have sounded interested. So hopefully I will have a few people that can share their employment journey with you. So kind of helping to see that employment is possible and the benefits it brings to people. So that'll be October 12th, of course, November 9th and December 14th. We do this the second Wednesday of every month from 1:30 to 2:30. So at the end, when you go to log off, you will get a survey. Please take a moment to complete that survey. That feedback is very helpful in figuring out, do we need to tweak some things? Do we need to offer some different topics or, structure things a little different? What do you guys need to feel like you're getting what you want out of these webinars? So, and of course, you can reach out to me anytime. Thank you, Ellen, for the plug. I'm glad I've been able to help you out along the way. So you can definitely reach out to me. Don't be surprised if I connect you all to one of those Employment First Missouri team members as well, so that they can also be helping you guys out. And last, before we do get off, there was a question about the benefits planning. So the code that you want to look for in Seymour. So if you're doing a report to kind of find out who are the service providers that offer this service, it is H0038SE. Last I looked, we had about 8 or 9 service providers offering the service. If you're having difficulties finding out or being able to run that report, please feel free to reach out to me and I will help walk you through that, so that you can see who are the options for that benefits planning service. And other than that, thank you all for spending some time with me this afternoon. And I loved the rich conversation we had. So hopefully you guys got something out of it. And I look forward to seeing you next month. Take care, everyone.